It's on. Is it on? It's on. There's a bit of feedback, but I think that's just audible for me. Okay, good. Well, there's 1 minute to go. Plenty of space left. Okay, 2 o'clock. I'll get started. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Mark. I'll introduce myself in a little bit more detail in a second. So, I'm going to talk about the value of your data today, and how Coalesce can help achieving that. So, the idea is that instead of focusing on just fixing pipelines, of course, not just trying to get you in here with that catchphrase, but it is actually about this, moving away from focusing on fixing code all the time, mostly code that you never wrote, to actually delivering value with that data. Okay, seeing as this is about data, some data points about me. I'll keep this short, so these are all relevant numbers for me. First one, 50K. That's the number of people that live in the small city where I'm from, in the Netherlands. Second, 42. It is the meaning of life, the universe and everything, but it's also my age. 3 is the number of kids I have. 20 is the number of years I've been in data. 5, but not really, it's 4. 5 is the number of years I've been involved with Coalesce, but because we started during COVID, it feels like 4. 700, that's a tricky one. That's about beer. So you may have heard of Untapped. I am actually on Untapped, and I've been collecting beers ever since. It's taken me a few years to get to this stage, though. So 700 different beers I've tried. And the last one is I have one dog. By the way, his name is Le Chouf, tying back to the beer. So, enough about me. And let's talk about Fred. Fred is the guy that I want you to meet. He doesn't actually exist, obviously. That's him. He lives and works in London. He loves coding and complex mathematical challenges mostly, but complex challenges in general. He likes to cycle. He likes to go to Richmond Park. I've never been, but I hear it's beautiful. He plays in a pub band, usually barefoot. I've watched him. It's nice. And he likes cooking curries, as you do. So that's Fred. Fred has been a happy guy for many years. So he works in this fast-growing business in insurance. And he has developed, to support himself, he has developed the Fred, the framework for rapid engineering of data pipelines. And this is helping him, because this is basically using a little bit of input, generating the code for him, and kind of helping him along already. So he has been, for the past few years, in his job, delivering valuable information and driving actionable insights. So the business where he works is happily using the data he provides and the information that he provides. So that started out, as it does quite often, in finance, and then it spread across the company to HR, and interest is growing. Now, Fred is a busy guy, but with all of his hobbies, he is still okay. So he's happy. Now, here Fred is a little bit less happy, right? And so, I know these are horribly generated pictures from ChatGPT, but that's fine. It's about painting the picture. So we're moving forward. Fred is struggling because he has gained a couple of colleagues in his data team. And the problem is he built that brilliant framework and no one gets it. So he has made all of these metadata tables and complicated templates. And it works if he does it, but if anyone else does it, he needs to be involved if they even make it work. So small changes take a long time to be deployed into that production environment. What's more, existing pipelines break all the time because he has many long pipelines where tables go into views, into more tables, and into views again. And finally, you need to fix something right in the middle. And it works it cascades. It's like a house of cards, basically. So that also ties into small changes taking long. He could change one character or one data type, and things just break unexpectedly. New colleagues in his team, even though they need to officially use the Fred framework, actually they do things their own way. Partly because the Fred framework is complicated, but partly because, they've got experience. They've been doing this stuff for a decade as well. They know how to do it. So they actually work their way and follow their best practices. So what is a best practice? Can't really say. Fast forward again. This is Fred now losing it, basically. You get questions from all over the company about purchasing forecasts. Could we actually use machine learning to do a bit of forecasting? Could we start using AI? People think, we have a great data platform, so it's very mature. We have an excellent data team. We have Fred in the company. Can we start using AI? People are excited. AI is a very much alive topic. You see it over here in the conference as well. HR migration, that happens, right? HR departments, finance departments, companies just replace their products with new, other, more modern, maybe cloud products. So in the data space, that is a big challenge, because you suddenly have old data, stale data, you have new data, somehow you need to integrate that and still report on everything. So that's actually quite a big challenge that Fred has here. But he also has big challenges that seem very small. Can you add a column for me to the, customer dimension? Because it's been added to the source system and I need it. And they asked for it 3 weeks ago. Why is it so hard to add one new column? They only see the dimension, but I think a lot of people in the room here know what can be behind one final table. Fred knows, and it scares him a little bit. And that's only his email, right? He's getting Slack messages all over the place. Where is table user 1, and how is that joined with table payment? There's examples all over the place. People asking about very strange tables. What was it? Temp final, I think, is a very known one. I think everyone has a temp final table. So it's becoming quite difficult for him. Or, in different words, his mailbox explodes and he doesn't know anymore what to do. All work and no play. It's a very old movie reference. Anyone know the movie? Yeah, of course. I'm not going to say it. So, Fred and his team are in trouble because they are trying to keep up with all of the changes just to run the day-to-day business. But meanwhile, he is also expected to innovate. You saw the questions. Can we use AI? Can we use machine learning to forecast stuff? He's getting pressure from the CDO, from the CFO, from the people handing him the money to pay for his team to do all of this work. What's more, all of that budget is going to the cloud database. They migrated to a cloud database happily years ago, but the credit consumption is going sky high. Why? Because, I mentioned it. There is no best practice in the company. And if you have no control over the code that gets executed daily, maybe even hourly, how are you going to control your costs? How are you going to control your credit consumption on your cloud platform? So there's just money flooding out over there. And maybe the worst thing, it can be expensive, right? It's fine that your data platform costs a lot of money, but if the value is there, that balances out. Although Fred is losing trust. So the people using the data products that he is delivering with his team, they often crumble. Things are missing. Things are empty. Numbers are too high, too low. And even if the numbers are correct, people don't know. There is no trust. So what do you see happening? Well, a lot of things are happening in that company, but Fred, because we're talking about Fred here, he can't go cycling, he can't do his pub band anymore, and instead of cooking his nice curries or anything at all for himself, he's having food delivered, just as a side effect. So I think a lot of people have been talking here and in other conferences as well about data mesh. So Fred only sees the data mess in his company. And this is kind of, I mean, this picture is from our official deck. Suddenly a different theme, right? And you can see whatever cloud database you're on, typically the same problem happens. In that transformation space, it's a nightmare because it's either YAML or it's manual SQL or a combination, or it's a Fred framework or something that you've cooked up. And I've been there as well, by the way. Just like Fred, I like building my own frameworks. That's much better. And that's why it happens so often. But again, the data engineers have no clue what's going on. There's no holistic view to see what the impact is on changes. And then we move forward to reporting. Reporting is done by data analysts. They build their own report, they have a question, or their department has a question, they build a dashboard. A few months in, different analyst, same question, they build the same report again. People are using similar data sets side by side, similar definitions, slightly different, and then the question comes, why is that number different than that number? It should be the same. No one knows. So it's becoming a nightmare. Everyone is basically going blind in the company. So it is a mess. Okay, I've seen a lot of nodding already, but just wanted to take a second. Does it sound familiar to anyone? Just hands up. If it is familiar, oh, that's what I was afraid of, actually. It's worse than I thought. Yeah, I've been in this space as well, in this situation, and luckily I'm now in a different position because AI is going to solve everything. Except it's not. So if you've been focusing on writing code and now think, oh, with AI we can write code faster, that's true. If your goal, if your value is about the lines of code you have on the database and the amount of credits consumed, this is the end of your presentation, of this presentation for you, but I think that's not the case. So actually delivering value is not about generating more code. That will just get you deeper into the hole a lot faster, right? I found an interesting meme that most of you have probably seen before and after GPT. There is a difference here. And I frankly wouldn't want to be in either position. But if I had to choose, I would choose the left one. Anyway, there's a way to get out of that, and Fred is dreaming about this. Fred has a dream. He's thinking, how can my engineers, how can my team focus on value again? And, you know, when we speak about governance, governance is often an afterthought. But it should be part of the engineering process. We should have governance right from the start, because where do you know the definition of what you are building? That's when you are building it, actually. And naming conventions, code conventions, all of that is also part of governance. And all of those aspects should be taken care of from the start and not thought of afterwards. And of course, analysts, trust. Trust is the key word again. The analysts in the company where Fred is working are using Excel files that they pulled out of the source systems just to compare the numbers, because there is no trust. This is costing him and his colleagues and everyone else in the company a lot of time. So, if you look at Fred's challenges, and we see a few ingredients that seem necessary, right? So, proactive data governance. I've just mentioned it. It should be implemented, integrated into the entire end-to-end flow, from the initial development to testing, to deploying, to using it as well. And this is actually quite a tricky challenge, because governance can be depending on the tool behind it. I don't know if anyone here has a data catalog in place to help with data governance. Quite often the problem is it is a catalog where you have to actively decide to go in and decide to enrich the information in there, to decide to document for the eventuality that someone might want to read it. However, the people who want that information are struggling to use that catalog very often because it's a technology-focused product. So the end users don't like to go into that catalog. So think about that as well. Proactive data governance, end-to-end, one end being engineering, but the other end being the consumers who actually use that information. Okay, the second one, standardized logic, is kind of, it sounds like a given, right? But it's pretty hard to make your teams, especially when you're in a bigger enterprise company and you have several teams working. How do you, as the central team, give the building blocks with the right amount of flexibility, but not too much, and an easy way to have them build the business logic that they need in SQL code, for example, because SQL is kind of the universal language when it comes to data processing, data transformations. But everything around that logic should be standardized. If you're on Snowflake, you want stuff to be maybe in a dynamic table or in a transient table in some cases. And there has to be a standard way of building a dimension. Maybe with a surrogate key, you have a start and end date, that kind of detail, but also naming conventions. Logic standardized and also optimized for the type of data that you have. Again, to save your credit consumption. Okay. Third one is compartmentalize, experiments. That basically means if people are working on the database, doing things, experimenting with the data, that should be possible. That should not be breaking existing pipelines. So separate that out. And also, if they're doing a Cartesian join that blows up the database, it should blow up their part of the database, the experimental part of the database, not the production part, not the reporting and analysis part. So that's an important one, because experiments on data should always be possible. Now, we talked about standardizing logic. This will also mean you can speed up, right? You don't have to write all the code yourself. You don't have to write YAML files yourself, but you can fill in the blanks, fill in the non-standard stuff, and that speeds up development. Great. But what needs to happen after development? It needs to be deployed. You need to get that to production, to be executed on production data, and if there is historical data in place, you need to make sure that you don't lose that history. Very often this becomes a painful process where people have to manually, I don't know what the word is basically, but you have to look into the small nitty-gritty details and pay a lot of attention. So it's a human job here to make sure that no data is lost and the change is made in the correct way. So you want to automate that. You want to automate the deployment of changes, right? So that's another thing, because not only engineering, development should be faster, getting it to the user should be fast, actually preferably automated as well. And lastly, yeah, you can't live without AI anymore, right? I mean, automation is cool, following patterns is cool, but what we see now is that AI can automate more. It can automate from basically text input. It's if you say, hey, build me a staging layer for my new source system and make all of the columns uppercase, and if there is a prefix, you don't even have to specify what prefix, take it away. So you can use AI here to accelerate even more than by just using classic bulk changes and classic coding patterns. So that is kind of the foundation for the scalable data engineering. And with Coalesce, this is, of course, where we finally get to. We have two products to do that. One is Transform. So that is your data engineering product, where the data engineers can use and define these building blocks. So central teams have maybe a project where they deliver the centralized data platform, where all the data comes in. If you talk about medallion architecture, raw data comes in, needs to be cleansed and integrated, goes into silver, and then you may have your gold layer managed by each individual business department. That is transform. And we give you the framework, the open application in the cloud to define your own building blocks, your own standards. So there's no need to make your company adapt to the Coalesce standards. No. At the start, you configure Coalesce to adapt to your standards. And then there's catalog, obviously, where all of that discovery and governance is brought to you as an end user with AI built right in. And again, let's say you use Power BI or you use Tableau or Sigma. If you are in your report, you want to know certain answers to certain questions. And that is where catalog is different. It comes to the user and it lowers that barrier of actually leveraging the potential of the catalog. And because of that, you get an upward positive flow because people are using it. So there is actually a value, a direct value, when you share your information in that catalog. So the quality goes up, which means the consumption goes up again by making it just easier to use. Right. This is kind of a similar picture, but more to position those two products. So you have ETL, or with cloud, of course, ELT. Coalesce Transform does the T in ELT. So the data lands on your cloud database, and then Coalesce comes in to do the transformation. But when you look end to end about that governance, about that cataloging, that information to make it understandable, we look at that end to end. So we look from the source all the way to your final dashboards and reports. So catalog goes across the entire pipeline. So catalog is about finding data instantly. You can go to Slack or go into Teams like you would ask your data colleague, but instead you ask the Coalesce catalog, where do I find this report? And it will show you. It will give you a link, direct link to your Power BI report or your Tableau report. You just click and go. So that saves time and money because people are no longer searching for stuff and people are no longer duplicating the work that someone else has already done. Now, understand and trust your data. Lineage is the key word here, but trust is also based on, is everything okay still? I mean, sure, I understand where the data came from and how it's calculated, but is everything okay? And so this is where, if you make sure that, and this is again one of the examples of putting governance into your process, if you apply your data quality tests from the get-go, from whenever you deploy, whenever you create your data pipelines, that's the point where you are testing, you're probing all the time. As you execute and refresh your data, the tests are executed as well. But then, what good is a test if the results are not immediately visible with the end user looking at a dashboard? So one specific example of the Coalesce catalog is that there is a simple little tab in the edge of the screen on everyone's Power BI dashboard, and it's either red or green. That's quite clear. Green, no data quality issues known. Red, there are data quality issues known. And you can click on the little tab and you can browse into details to see what the data quality issue is, just to make sure that people actually know from the moment it is measured if there is an issue. So that builds trust. And governing at scale, obviously. This is what counts, right? In this way, with that data mesh, not mess, I almost missaid it. If you work in that data mesh approach, where you can actually hand out the responsibilities to the business teams, that scales. Because you don't have to hold everything close to you in a centralized data team anymore. Right, with Transform, the same thing happens. Accelerate development, I've mentioned it. Using those patterns, you accelerate development, you minimize risk, because you don't type, when you type, you make a typo. So it's sustainable, and if you have optimized patterns, you can simply change them. We don't save any code anywhere, so that's how that works. Standardizing development, yeah, we talked about these things, right? Empowering the whole data team means you, as the core data team, can give projects with pre-built building blocks to everyone in the business, to HR, to finance, and they can do their own thing. That really helps. So Fred has done all of this, and he's happy. He's happy because he went from firefighting to value creation. And okay, so this is again an official slide. And that number here, 10x productivity gain, is not some arbitrary number. We actually have customers, we ask them, is it, how much is your productivity gain? And there was even one where it was quite funny. We showed a similar slide in an early stage, and they said, yeah, okay, we see the value that Coalesce adds. We see the reason for having it. We see why we would buy it, so we will buy it. That's good, but we don't believe the 10x. If it's 2x, 3x, that's good enough for us. We don't believe the 10x. That's just marketing. And a few months later, they had onboarded and their teams are using it, and they had their first pipelines live, and they came back to us and said, we have to apologize because that 10x, we are actually achieving that. We are actually now 10 times faster. So that was pretty cool to hear. That was a nice touch. So yeah, intelligent automation. Not just when you are developing or when you are looking for information, but also inside the pipelines, because platforms like Snowflake and Databricks, they have AI built in. And with Coalesce, you can build those AI functions right into the pipelines as well, because it's such a flexible platform. Multi-product, multi-cloud. There's a lot of platforms we support. I've mentioned it a few times. So there's 3 minutes left, but this is the last slide I have, essentially. And I want to leave you with the question, what would you build if you weren't just focusing on fixing data pipelines? So, you probably have some dreams, some stuff that would need to happen, but there are a million reasons, of which I named a few maybe during this presentation, reasons why you can't, why you're not ready yet. But what if you were? What if you had a scalable platform and you had everything in order? What would you build? Think about that and let us know, actually. So we are right over there. N70, I think, is our booth number. We have some swag as well. We're here today and tomorrow. So I hope this was a useful presentation. Fred is happy, so it's a happy ending story. I hope this was insightful. It was definitely recognizable for a scary lot of you. But thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.